Welcome, age-defying achievers. Welcome to the Full Body Fix. This is going to be a show that makes you an even better driver for the decision-making of your health and your fitness. You know, you can have life extension or you can have vitality, right? You can either extend your longevity so you live longer, or you can extend your vitality. So the first question I have for you, because I would love for our expert guest to see this, is type in the chat. Are you more interested in extending your life or longevity, or are you more interested in extending vitality? What's most important to you? Well, our expert guest has already proved to me that he's an expert, because before we joined and we have our meeting that before we come live with all of you, your answer is exactly what he said, which is very interesting. So he's already proven to be the world-class expert that I already know he is. So 95% of people die before the age of 100, but there's a difference between extending life and prolonging vitality. Our mission is to extend your vitality. Yes, you can live longer, but let's extend that vitality. There's few things that rank up there with the impact that exercise has on vitality. And it's been proven that exercise of 150 minutes per week will make your genes 10 years younger. But how much more can we push that with optimal exercise and optimal nutrition combined along with a healthy lifestyle? 20 years, 30 years? Regarding optimal nutrition, there's so many components that make up this subject, but some of the most important things for your vitality are macronutrients. Macronutrients are fat, carbohydrate, and protein. Alcohol is technically also a macronutrient, but obviously we're not going to include that or talk about alcohol today. So it's not really a nutrient, but it gets classified under a macronutrient. It has its own calories per gram score, which is 7. Right. So in terms of fat research in the 1940s was popularized that you should have a low-fat diet, and there's all this research on why you should have a low-fat diet. And by the 70s, this became extremely popular, including government involvement. And then in the 1970s, there was a lot of carbohydrate research, and that started producing popularity in low carbohydrate diets by the 1990s. Now, within the last 10 years, it's starting to be popular to have low protein. So my question is, if we just stop eating everything, what's going to happen? What is going to happen to your vitality? And much of this we've seen, it's not about having one macronutrient be low. It's about understanding the vitality benefits that you get from each macronutrient, and then figuring out based on you, your lifestyle, your physical activity, and your goals, how best to use those nutrients to get the vitality extension you're looking for, and overall fitness, overall health, happiness, greater quality of life. Right? So regarding optimal nutrition, one of the major components of that is protein. How much, what type, when? Is high great for health? And is there any truth, validity to new claims of low protein being optimal to longevity? That's what we'll be focusing on today. So how to add more vitality to your years and how best to utilize protein for achieving that objective. We're going to be doing that with one of the world's premier experts. He is one of the premier experts on the subject of protein, and he's actually conducted research in his laboratory that nobody else in the world has done. He's looked at things with protein that nobody else has done. Okay, and this expert and friend of mine is Dr. Jose Antonio. He's a chief executive officer and co-founder of the International Society of Sports Nutrition, which is an academic nonprofit dedicated to the science and application of sports nutrition and supplementation. Simply, he is the leader of one of the most elite nutrition organizations in the world for certifying experts in nutrition. So he is the top of the pinnacle of the pyramid in terms of nutrition knowledge, wisdom. He's also a university professor. He has his own clinical laboratory. He's co-founder and vice president of the Society for Neurosports, an academic nonprofit with a focus on sports neuroscience. He has published over 100 peer-reviewed papers, as well as over a dozen books. His current areas of research include dietary supplements like creatine, protein, sports neuroscience, and human performance. Please, if you would, help me welcome my dear friend, Dr. Antonio. Welcome to the show, Dr. Antonio.
Thank you, Rob. Appreciate the introduction. I'm currently in South Florida. This is how I spend most of my time when I'm not doing the academic stuff. I'm on the water, getting lots of vitamin D, getting lots of exercise. So that's how I spend my time in terms of improving my vitality. Now, this is actually an interesting topic as it relates to protein, as it relates to macronutrients and things like that. Questions of vitality versus questions of longevity. I think what's interesting is that at least the population I work with, and I actually tend to work primarily with athletes, and their goal typically is either they want to run faster, they want to lift more weights, they just want to do better in a particular event or activity that they choose. And training for that is a lot different than, quote, training for vitality per se. However, as a side benefit to training for performance, these individuals they have greater vitality, basically. So in a way, if you don't focus per se on training for vitality versus, let's say, training for a specific thing, vitality becomes a side benefit, as does, when we talked about this, as does longevity. I mean, people who exercise obviously live longer. However, it's one of those things. If you look at individuals who live in the blue zones, and these are people who are not even genetically similar. You're talking about Okinawa versus parts of Greece, parts of Italy, parts of the United States, Costa Rica. What's interesting about them, if the goal is to live as long as possible, they're not lifting weights. They're not running. They're not even paddling like what I do. They're just moving. They move their bodies constantly. They don't eat much. And this sort of falls into the protein question about eating a high protein diet. They don't eat much. And they tend to eat unprocessed food. So they're not eating junk food like Americans are doing. And probably North America in general, Canada, Mexico, United States. They live in small communities. And they have a very tight-knit group of people that they're close to. So in a way, living in a big city would be counter to those whose goal would be longevity. If you want to live long, you need to move somewhere where it's a small, tight-knit community. Living in a city, besides the pollution, although it's much better now than in the 1970s, is not the way to go. So I think there's a lot of nuance here when it comes to protein and the macronutrients. And it's funny, Robbie, that you said alcohol, we don't count alcohol, although, I mean, you have to admit, there is some data on particularly red wine, moderate consumption might increase longevity. So you can't ignore the data just because it runs counter to what you personally believe. I mean, personally, I'm not a red wine drinker, I'm a beer drinker.
I remember last time you and I had a private meeting, you had a beer in your hand.
That's right. That's right. So it's complicated.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot we want to unpack here. So for our audience members and VIPs, there's a lot we want to unpack here. There's one complex subject also in terms of some claims that are coming out about low protein. I want to get into the benefits of protein, but also talk about things that potentially you all have heard in terms of, high protein can be bad for you for this reason and that reason. So we'll unpack that. And so we'll present to you during a conversation structure. And then at the end, we'll give you audience and VIP members ability to ask questions. Our VIPs, of course, first, they have exclusive first dib access to asking questions. So with that, Jose, tell us what you've seen. So everybody wants vitality. We saw in the chat, everyone wants vitality.
Yeah.
So what would you say is the number one thing that people need to know and that you've seen from research in terms of extending that vitality by utilizing protein?
Well, it's interesting. The kinds of questions I get focus not on vitality per se, but they focus on body composition. And as you know, if you want to break down body composition into something, quite simple, it's the amount of lean body mass you have, which would be primarily skeletal muscle, bone, organs, blood, versus how much fat mass you have. And obviously we all know what fat is. And the indirect benefit of improving body composition is that you have more vitality. People with, who tend to be leaner, obviously they're leaner, one because their diet tends to be better too. They're also just more active. And if they're more active, they're going to have that kind of vitality. So I think the keys here for, in terms of improving vitality, the challenge with that from a scientific perspective is it's not easily measurable. We have instruments or tools, like for instance, there's an instrument I use when we do some of these studies called the Profile of Mood States. It's a questionnaire which looks at things like anger, fatigue, vigor, and things like that. And it's a way to sort of gauge, how people feel. And we know that with exercise that people do tend to feel better. They tend to have more vigor or energy, much less fatigue. So there is something there. Again, it's just difficult to measure. It's not like measuring body weight where there's something clear to measure. But again, it's, this is primarily an exercise and a diet issue. Now, on the diet side, in terms of protein, this is where it gets a little tricky. Most of the individuals who consume a higher protein diet, and I'll define it like this, excuse me, for my American audiences, Americans in the audience, high protein is 1 gram per pound. So if you weigh 150 pounds, you got to consume 1 gram of protein. So that would be 150 grams. If you can't think in pounds, think in kilos. That's 2.2 grams per kilo of protein. Now, most people don't reach that. So in a sense, most people are never even close to a high protein diet. And the way I define it versus the way someone else might define it is actually quite different. And got to keep in mind, I'm coming from a sports science point of view, not a general health or public health point of view. So I'm dealing primarily with very active individuals ranging in age from 18 to 70 versus general population where you're dealing with a lot of inactive or sedentary individuals. So there's that difference there. But and I actually have my college students, and they're all, obviously they're all quite young and energetic. So, being young is an advantage. I always challenge them to do a self-experiment. Consume 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, see what happens. And what does happen if they adhere to it is that their body composition improves. Say they'll lose a little bit of fat, might gain a little bit of muscle, and overall they just feel better. Now, whether it's just all in their head, they're like, whoa, I look better, therefore I feel better, versus I feel better because I'm consuming more protein. At the end of the day, it probably doesn't matter. If you feel better, you feel better. Now, a lot of the athletes I work with are actually consuming much more than 1 gram per pound. They're consuming more than 2.2 grams per kilo. And in that case, people ask, well, is that even safe to do? Because it increases these enzymes or these factors. As you and I talked about, Robbie, it elevates MTOR, which is one of those things that elevates muscle protein synthesis, but also it's related to, tumor formation and things like that. And again, it's, I'll borrow this phrase, there are no perfect solutions, there are only trade-offs. So if you're on a higher protein diet, I guarantee you your body composition will be better. I guarantee you that you'll have less body fat. Why? Because protein is highly thermogenic. You're burning, just to consume, for instance, if you consume 100 calories of protein versus 100 calories of carbs versus 100 calories of fat, just to absorb and digest 100 calories of protein, you're burning about 30 calories. For fat and carbs, if you're consuming 100 calories of fat or carbs, you're going to burn maybe 5, maybe up to 10 calories. So just the act of consuming more protein it's an inefficient way to put on fat. So that's why it's, when you talk to people who work in the physique world, it's very hard. If the goal is, for instance, let's say I wanted to get fat, that's my goal. Well, protein's not the way to do it. If I want to get fat, I'd be eating carbs and fat all day long. But obviously I don't want to get fat. But the higher protein diets that you see athletes do, they're doing it for reasons that are so, I want to say, rare. These are people who train so hard that they need it just to recover so that they can exercise the next day. Now that, you got to understand, that's completely different than people who exercise to feel better. Now, like for instance, I'm 59 years old. I can pretend that I'm an athlete out there because it is pretending. Let's face it, I'm not making money entering these races because they have stand-up paddling races in Florida, but I do it to challenge myself. And I consume a fairly high protein diet just to help me recover, because if it helps me recover, I can get it back out on the water and train. So for me, in my mindset is I do this because I feel better, but also I do it to challenge myself. And by challenging myself, I need to consume these macronutrients just to recover. If I go on a lower calorie diet, or let's say a lower protein diet to increase longevity, guess what? I'm going to feel like crap. I'm going to be tired. I won't recover, and I might get injured. But again, let's say my goal is, I'm like, who cares about paddling? Who cares about racing? Let's say my goal is just to live long. Well, I'll tell you this, I'd probably lose weight. I weigh 180, 85. I have been weight stable probably for over a decade. My weight has not changed, but I might be a little heavy. Even if it's lean body mass, I'm probably a little heavy. I should probably eat less too. I mean, the reason I eat so much is just to recover from exercise. Otherwise, I'm just tired all the time. So there are these interesting nuances we got to, keep in mind when we're talking about, you want to feel better. That's why you do what you do versus you want to perform better. But the side effect of performing better is you probably feel better. So it's complicated, but it's fun to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that makes a ton of sense. So basically, I mean, you're giving us the 10,000 foot view, so you don't give the science that will confuse everyone. So thank you for that, because I know you could go in that direction also. So really what it is look, if you feel better and you're leaner and you're more functional, you're going to have a more fit life. And actually that thing, even though like David Sinclair from Harvard University is showing, oh, if you have high protein, if you have high protein, then our NAD comes down, and NAD is this thing that shuttles electrons through your metabolic pathway. And then these other body signaling processes change to not extend your longevity as much. Well, first of all, again, that's the big claim these days, guys. And David Sinclair is coming out with this. And I think what you would say, Jose, is it is, although there's some truth to that. First of all, they're looking at them in what we call the postprandial state. So it's right after eating, number one, and NAD is transient. In other words, it goes up and down and it fluctuates and it changes. So one of the things I saw is, okay, yeah, you just had protein. You just said it's the most thermogenic macronutrient. So you're going to be running your metabolism and using your NAD, which is David Sinclair's claim about low protein, is saying, hey, the NAD went lower. Well, yeah, duh, because you're using the NAD, and that's why it's lower. So, yeah. But if we're doing something and we're taking these actions, it's like if I use my car less, right? If I use my car less and I put less fuel in it and I use it less, it's going to last longer. Well, yeah, but there's so much more to that. Different than the car, your human body, when you use it, it gets better. So what about that? And what about the recovery that you need? And what about the protein you need to get that recovery and have that optimal function, right?
Right. And those are all great points. In fact, I want to deal with the protein and sarcopenia issue. I don't want to get too technical, but also the issue of people who exercise live longer. I mean, I've given talks to groups of physicians, and I tell them the single most important thing anyone can do to improve their health, it's not a pill, it's not a drug, it's you just got to work out. And here's the interesting thing, Robbie, and you know these stats. By the year 2030, three out of every 4 Americans, and I don't know what it's like in other countries, it's probably somewhat similar in Canada and Mexico, 3 out of 4 individuals will be either overweight or obese. Now, I'm old enough to remember back in the 1970s where it was rare to see someone who was overweight. It was rare. In fact, in grade school, there was always the one kid who was fat. And of course, everyone made fun of him because it was the one kid that was fat. Now, you got to find the one kid who isn't fat. I mean, all these kids are overweight. So you're dealing with, questions of, when you're dealing with questions of protein intake and longevity, what sort of gets lost there, and the data you refer to that Sinclair is referring to, what gets lost in there is that as we get older, we actually become less sensitive to the effects of protein, meaning we actually need more than a younger person to get the same effect. One of the issues with aging, as you're well aware, is sarcopenia. It's the age-related loss of skeletal muscle mass. And loss of lean body mass is associated with increased risk of mortality. I mean, if you end up in a hospital bedridden and you're losing lean mass like crazy, that's a bad thing. The outcomes will be poor. And it doesn't mean you have to have the lean body mass of a bodybuilder. It just means you have to have some lean mass someone who's active will have more than someone who's inactive. So the fact that you need that protein to maintain lean body mass is lost in that debate, whether or not it activates mTOR or any of these growth factors. It's like, well, wait a minute, let's deal with things that are easy to measure. You know what's easy to measure? Whether we have fat or muscle or fat or lean mass. You and I can do that. Anyone has access to that. But when you're talking about turning off and on these genes related to aging, it's purely speculative. You and I can't measure it. I can't go to hey, let's see what genes are. We can't do that. But we can measure lean mass. And we know lean mass is loss of lean mass is a predictor of morbidity and mortality. So you don't want to lose it, but it doesn't mean you have to be a bodybuilder.
Yeah, and the studies that they're doing to support low protein are done in such a little time frame, and then saying, oh, these are the way the genetic signaling changed, right? And in terms of mTOR, which Dr. Antonio has brought up a few times, tell us a little bit more, because there's actually a lot of good stuff to mTOR that actually could produce more vitality and more longevity, for that matter, increase bone density and many other things because of the effect overall it has on the system.
Yeah, probably easiest way to think of mTOR is it's a signaling molecule. And if you consume, for instance, if you consume protein, like milk protein or beef or even vegetable-based proteins, you get an elevation of mTOR. And so just think about, you're turning on, it's a dimmer switch, you're sort of turning it on. And what does mTOR do? It helps promote muscle protein synthesis, which as we age, we have a harder time keeping muscle on, or lean body mass. But protein is needed to do that. Carbs won't do it, fat won't do it. You got to consume protein. And that's why when I hear people going on a low protein diet, the first thing I think of is, well, they're going to not only lose lean mass, they're going to have a hard time recovering from exercise, which begs the question, are these people exercising? And if they're not exercising because they can't recover, then they're sort of missing the big picture. And the big picture is, in order to feel better, you got to recover. And if you're not recovering, then none of it makes sense. So it's, focusing on something as these, I call it, when you start cherry picking the science to support a particular point of view, it becomes problematic. Now, tumor cells also, cancerous growth, elevation of mTOR. Like I said before, there are no perfect solutions, only trade-offs. So you as an individual has to decide, well, what trade-off are you willing to live with? If I go on a low protein diet, which probably also means a low calorie diet, I'll lose some weight, probably lose lean body mass. I might live longer, but there's so many factors related to live longer. But I also might feel less energetic because I'm not getting enough protein. And if I exercise, I probably won't recover as well because I'm not getting enough protein. So you have to decide what's important, what's important. Sort of sticking to this theoretical idea that, well, if I eat low protein, don't consume as many calories, my body weight drops, I'll live longer. If that's the decision, that's the decision someone wants to make. We're all individuals. But I think the goal should be to, number one, just be active. Choose an exercise or activity that you comply with. It doesn't have to be running. It doesn't have to be lifting. It just has to be something. It has to be something, and stick to it. And then the second part to that is consume foods and or supplements that contribute to your health and recovery from those activities. So obviously, if your goal is just to be active, it's easy to recover from that. If your goal is to, let's say, compete in distance running, now you got to really change the way you eat if you just want to recover.
So in terms of, from all the research and all the science, the body of science that you see, in terms of, someone over the age of 50 that's working out, as you all should be, 4+ times per week, five times per week. So they're getting in a solid 4 hours a week of exercise. Over the age of 50, what would be your recommendation for proper intake of protein? What type of protein, timing, all those things to optimize vitality?
So for over 50, we're talking.
Yes, sir. Yep.
Okay, well, you're basically talking about me, Robbie. Come on.
Yeah.
All right, here's what I would suggest. And this isn't a theoretical thing to me. This is actually, I practice what I preach. In fact, my kids are in college. They do the same thing too. And this is what my wife and I told them to do. It's you got to get a gram per pound. So at age, I'm 59. So if you're over 50, you need to, your goal, and when I always say this is your goal, people, if you don't reach it, that's fine, you know, but try to reach it, attempt to reach it. Maybe you'll overshoot it, which is fine. But 1 gram per pound of body weight, or 2.2 grams per kilo. Now, there might be days you don't reach it. There might be days you're over it. But as long as over the course of days and months, you're averaging that, I think that's a good thing. The sources to consume, I still firmly believe that the single best food you can consume is fish, because especially fatty fish, because you got protein and you got those healthy fats. You got the omega-3 fatty acids. If you hate fish, in fact, a lot of my friends will not touch fish. Lean sources of protein, whether it's from chicken or lean beef. I like, for instance, ready to drink protein shakes made of whey protein. It's almost all protein. There's no fat, probably not even any carbs. That's also another choice. To me, rather than getting bogged down on the type, I always tell people focus on the protein sources that you will consume regularly. If you don't like milk protein, don't start. If you prefer a plant-based protein like pea protein, rice protein, or hemp as a shake, a post-workout shake or post-exercise shake, stick to that. You got to do what you can adhere to. As far as timing, in general, the research tends to show that you got to spread your meals over the course of the day. You know, you could probably just stick to breakfast, lunch, dinner, maybe with a small snack somewhere in there, somewhere in the middle. It depends on your job. I mean, if you're sedentary, you're sitting at a desk all day, you have that kind of access, that kind of flexibility. But really, you know, get your protein containing meals, you know, breakfast, lunch, dinner, spread out over the course of the day. Also, one thing to bump up your intake would be to consume protein post-workout. To me, that is the simplest way to bump up your intake. For instance, they have ready to drinks, RTDs, we call them in the industry, ready to drinks that have up to 42, even 50 grams of protein. You go work out or you go for a walk or whatever your exercise is, swimming, you drink one of those and you've already got 40 to 50 grams. And if you weigh 150 pounds, that's 1/3 of your goal. Now, people ask me, well, what if I go over the goal? If you go over the goal, that's fine. In fact, if you go way over the goal, I guarantee you'll lose body fat. One of the side benefits or side effects of that much protein is that it tends to blunt your appetite. One of the common complaints that bodybuilders have with protein is they're actually never hungry, and they have to, in a way, force themselves to eat just to maintain muscle mass because that's their sport, that's their goal. So it might blunt your appetite, which I guess depending on how you look at it, may or may not be a good thing. I mean, I think some of us just want to be hungry so we can have a good meal, you know, for dinner or whatnot. But yeah, so timing, spread it out throughout the day, get something post-workout. As far as the choices, animal-based proteins are superior to plant-based proteins. But if all you do is consume plant-based proteins, you know, if you're a vegan or vegetarian, you just have to consume a little bit more of it to get the same effect. And I think if you follow those, you know, get 1 gram per pound, I think you'll be good.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for that answer, Dr.
Sure.
Antonio. And so one of the questions that we had, I have some questions here that some VIPs sent me that couldn't attend the show today. So I'm going to go ahead and read this question. And then, by the way, VIPs first, and then our open audience members. VIPs, start getting your questions ready, because the very next thing I'm going to do is go to you, because what better questions to answer than your questions? So get those ready. You can also type them in the chat while I'm going through this one. And that is from our VIP, Karen. And she asked, for those of us moving into our 70s, it is my understanding that it is more difficult for us to digest protein, especially beef, in her words. And should we be taking enzymes to help digest the proteins we are including in our diet? If so, which ones?
That's a good question. In fact, not just in your 70s, I know actually people in their 30s or 40s who say they have a hard time digesting certain proteins. And it almost always, I don't typically hear beef. I actually tend to hear milk protein. So like, for instance, they can't consume whey or upsets their stomach. Beef, that's never come up, but I guess, it's an individual thing. And rather than worrying about consuming digestive enzymes, I just shift them to trying other sources of protein, unless they're so in love with that particular food that they need, these digestive enzymes. But most of those digestive enzymes that you can purchase online, I don't know how effective they are in terms of helping you with a specific set of proteins. So I would typically still go towards an alternative protein source. Although, like for instance, I love beef. If I, for whatever reason, couldn't consume beef anymore, I'd be a little sad, but then I would just have to eat a lot more fish.
Yeah, and then next up, let's see here. We'll go ahead. We have some VIPs and look, so we have some people asking, oh, what is the right amount? And it's a number. There's this question that's being asked should be answered because it's a question on everybody's mind, I know. And look, this is the first thing I'm going to say. I'm a specialist in a lot of things. Biomechanical optimization is one. Anti-aging fitness is another big subject, but Dr. Antonio is the leading source on protein, and he'd shared with you why high, why low, what's the benefits. So what I do, based on all of that information, based on knowing all of our VIP goals, our personal VIP training system says 1 gram per pound of lean body mass to adjust for those who are really overweight. But hey, he is the leading resource on protein. He says 1 gram per pound. So that's kind of your sweet spot. I try to match like the longevity, but Dr. Antonio, exactly, he shared, look, there's benefits of this lower side. Here's the benefits, but you're creating a trade-off. So that's why we just go with 1 gram per pound of lean body mass. I don't know how you feel about that, Dr. Antonio.
No, actually, that actually comes up somewhat frequently. And the reason we, at least myself, the reason we go with 1 gram per pound and not 1 gram per lean body mass is actually fairly difficult to get an accurate account of lean body mass. I do body composition analysis like constantly. In fact, every study we've done involves body composition analysis. And if the goal is 1 gram per pound, let's say you weigh 200 pounds, and even if that 200 pounds is an overweight 200 pounds, if you get close to 200 grams of protein, you're going to lose fat mass. It's just a side benefit of it. So if you went with 1 gram per pound of lean body mass, assuming you can estimate it, it would necessarily be just a lower protein intake. Now, people who it typically comes up when people are overweight. If you're a 5-foot woman and you weigh 150 pounds, okay, slightly overweight, should they have 150 grams? My answer is yeah, that should be the goal. Even if they don't hit it, the attempt to hit it and needing that much protein will result in better body composition, which ultimately will result in a loss of fat mass. So by losing fat mass, total body mass will drop, and they could necessarily drop their protein intake. So there's not I always say we're talking about trade-offs.
Yeah.
There's not a bad effect of eating that much protein. In fact, it'll be a benefit. So, but it's hard. It's hard to hit that.
We should talk about, before we go deeper into questions, actually, one thing that we haven't shared, which is a longitudinal, long-term research that you did on high versus very high protein. So share the results with us.
Yeah, I think I'm the only one who's done what I would call super duper high protein intakes. In fact, we followed a group of men for 2 years. They consumed 3.5 grams per kilo. That's roughly 1.5 grams per pound of body weight. So if you weighed 100 pounds, that's 150 grams. We found no side effects. I mean, the main goal was to look at safety. We found no side effects. Their blood lipids are fine. In fact, their blood lipids are awesome. Kidney function fine, liver function fine, blood glucose fine, everything was fine. Now here's the caveat. People are like, wow, that's a lot of protein. I'm like, yeah, it's a lot of protein. In fact, I couldn't do it. I can't eat that much protein. I just can't. But here's the caveat. These people train like crazy. And when I say train like crazy, they're subjecting their body to an amount of exercise stress that most human beings will not subject their bodies to. And that's what makes the population I work with who eat these high protein diets unique. Because, like, for instance, we did a 1-year study in women, looking to see if there were any side effects of high protein diets, looking at bone, kidney, liver, things like that. But these women, we had world-class runners, we had world-class paddlers, we had world-class lifters. These are women who train like crazy. So from a scientific point of view, someone could say, well, the reason they're healthy is because they work out so much. And I'm like, yeah, we could say that. In fact, I highly recommend everyone work out as much as these people, but people can't, except like this less than 1% of the population is willing to work out that hard. So if that's the cause of keeping them healthy despite the high protein, I'm like, hey, perfect. Work out like crazy. In fact, I think exercise is more important than anything. And someone say, and then the criticism, well, what if you got just an average person to consume that much protein? And my answer is, you'll never get the average person consume that much protein. It's not ever gonna happen, ever, like ever.
Yeah.
So we're talking about a unique population.
Yeah, but the big thing you saw was between the high protein and the very high protein was that the very high protein people had the same amount of lean body mass, but they actually lost body fat, which is showing the thermogenic effect of the protein and how effective protein is for just creating a leaner body.
You are absolutely correct. I forgot to mention that, but since you mentioned it, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, now we're going to go to our VIP questions. And Sandy, you are up first. Welcome.
Hi.
Hi,
Yeah,
Sandy.
my question is, I'm wanting to go back to my intermittent fasting, which would give me a kind of a small window to eat, maybe 6, 8 hours, probably 8 hours, I suppose. And do you have any suggestions for a protein source that you can just add to your food? Like, it seems like when I used to work out really hard years and years ago, I'd add chia seeds, or I can't remember, something like that to a lot of things. And that, do you have any suggestions? I don't even know of any.
Yeah, in terms of
Add-
adding protein to
Yeah,
existing foods,
Yes, simply. I mean, obviously meat is, a no-brainer. But I mean, if I were to have a salad with meat, or a shake, which has protein, but maybe I could add something to it.
yeah, it's in a way you're kind of limited in protein sources because you're either consuming meats, which includes fish, eggs,
Right.
and or milk, and that's really it. Now, regardless of your training status, whether you're a world-class athlete or recreational athlete or just you're just an active human being, the easiest way I have found is consuming those liquid, they're ready to drink shakes. I mean, and a lot of them are quite small. So they're not difficult to consume. They have anywhere from 20 to 50 grams of protein, and that seems to be the easiest way because it's already in a container, and you just pop it, open it, drink it, and it takes. I always say it takes the thinking out of it, because you don't want. I always say diet shouldn't be about mathematics. You have to count stuff. How much chicken do I add, or how much cottage cheese should I add? It's already there and it's convenient. That seems to work best for most people. And I would try it. And if you're compliant with it, that's a good thing. But other than chopping up small bits of meat and then adding it, for instance, to salad, or consuming cottage cheese at night, I think cottage cheese is gross, to be honest, but it's protein. I think the liquid protein shakes would probably be your best bet.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thanks, Andy.
Thank you.
Maddie Claude, hello and welcome.
Getting better. Hi.
Yes.
Hi.
I was just wondering, what about if you're a vegetarian, or if you want to go there? I feel that you won't have any close of protein. What you said. I mean, what should we eat? A big amount of.
Yeah, that's a good question. I get that question often. When you say vegetarian, are you allowed to consume eggs?
Well, actually, I'm not a vegetarian, but I just want to go there because I'm kind of fed up with meat. But about what you said, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna miss a lot of protein because I mean, for a small amount of meat, you have a big amount of protein. For a small amount of beans, you don't have a lot of protein. So it's like,
Yeah, beans and God, beans and rice, I would get sick of that. Now, if you allow yourself to eat eggs and drink milk or consume dairy-based products like cheese, I think you'll be okay. And because eggs and dairy-based product are actually probably the single best sources of protein. But if you eliminate milk-based proteins or eggs, then it just gets really difficult. And here's what's happened, because whenever I work with vegetarians or vegans, they're not going to consume any animal products, is they end up compensating for the lack of protein by eating more carbs. And by eating more carbs, they end up actually eating more calories, and they end up gaining weight. So in a weird way, even though it sounds healthier to go vegan or vegetarian, one of the side effects is that you end up eating more just because you got to get protein somewhere.
Yeah.
And so I would recommend, if you're sick of meat, at least stick to some milk and cheese,
Yogurt?
Eggs.
Yogurt
What's
is
that?
fine? Is yogurt fine?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, yogurt's great. Yes. Yeah.
The only thing I like is
So
dairy. Okay. Okay, thank you.
you're welcome.
Jose, what do you think about dairy and like a lot of the negative health effects that have been talked about in terms of dairy and the immune system and all the other things with dairy?
It's interesting you mentioned dairy, because that actually was the source of protein that we supplemented in these studies that lasted 6 months, 1 year, and 2 years. And we found no adverse effects. But keep in mind that these are people who normally consume dairy anyways. And I'll give you a personal story. I think starting at age 18, I couldn't eat ice cream. I couldn't drink milk. I'd get a stomach ache. I felt awful. And then I saw my kid drinking this milk one day, and I'm like, hey, what's that milk? And it had no lactose, because I'm lactose intolerant. Of course, every Asian seems to be. And I'm like, hey, I think I'm going to drink this milk. So literally for the last 10 years, I've been drinking milk, whereas for like 30 years, I never touched it. I couldn't drink milk. So does it have harmful effects? What's interesting is if you look at data on dairy, there's what's called an inverse relationship between dairy consumption and percent fat, meaning people who tend to consume the most dairy tend to carry the least amount of body fat, which is, I'm like, that's kind of cool. I'm not sure how that works, but I think this is how it works. People who consume dairy, i.e. milk, also are not consuming other crap like soft drinks. So they're basically doing a replacement. Instead of drinking soft drinks or beer, they're drinking milk. So, of course, if that's the choice, you're going to be better off. But the data is pretty strong that the more dairy you consume, the lower your body fat.
But like you said, as compared in the research to likely they're consuming other junk food, so to speak. So if you're consuming dairy, you're eating less of the junk food. Yeah. It's kind of like I see with fasting. A lot of the fasting research, not that fasting, there's not health benefits to fasting, but a lot of the fasting research has, okay, they ate crap all day or just for a shorter period of time. And those who ate it for a shorter period of time had better health results. Really? So, that's a lot of the fasting research. If anybody has other research contrary to that, send it my way. But
can I comment on that?
Yes, absolutely.
Can I comment on that?
Yes,
yeah,
sir.
Okay. Not just the fasting research, not just the intermittent fasting research, but also the diet research. And this is where people get into trouble. They'll read something like, oh, if I went on a carnivore diet, I lost fat, feel better, everything's great, blood lipids. Oh, but I did the ketogenic diet. Oh, but I did the low fat, high carb diet. Oh, but I did the high protein diet. And I think here's what gets lost. Oftentimes it's not really what you're eating, it's what you're eliminating. And in all those diets, as you're aware, they eliminate a lot of the junk. It's sort of like, well, if we just get rid of all this stuff, it almost doesn't matter what you're eating, because the rest of what you're eating is unprocessed healthy food. I mean, if we don't eat junk, whether it's high protein, whether it's low fat, whether it's whatever, it's what you're eliminating that is helping you in terms of diet. Now, it's funny you mentioned the fasting data. Or here's the funny part. When I was a kid, they called it skipping breakfast. Now they call it time-restricted eating. And I'm like, who comes up with this stuff? I mean, these scientists come up with all these words. I'm like, wait a minute. So when I skipped breakfast as a kid, it was bad. Now, that's called time-restricted eating, which is now good for you. I'm like, wait, I thought breakfast is good for you. Well, no, because if you time-restrict eat, you don't eat as many calories, and now you're lean and you're healthy. And I'm like, what a load of shit. And I'm a scientist, so I make fun of other scientists. I'm like, who makes up these words? You're just making up words now. You know, of course, if you only eat for like 4 hours a day, of course you're going to get skinny because you're not eating, you know. But anyhow, thought I'd mention that, Robbie.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. Okay. So Patricia, you have your hand raised. Go ahead. Did you mean to have your hand raised? You have a question. All right.
Yes, I do have a question. And my question is, I like to drink protein drinks quite a bit. And
Me too.
hearing they're fantastic and they're easy and they are super cool. And I would love, if I could, I would replace my meals with drink, but I would kill my husband, give him a heart attack if I would do that. So now I believe I can drink 2 whey proteins instead of 1 a day. Yes?
Yes. Yeah, why wouldn't, or why couldn't you? Or why would Robbie be against it?
Because you need to eat fish, Patty. You need to eat salad, Patty. You need to put nutrients, Patty. You cannot be drinking only, Patty.
It's kind of like it's the same exact thing in reverse that you were talking about, Dr. Antonio, about how if you eat this healthy food, then you're not eating this junk. Well, she'll eat the whey protein, which has some nutrients in it, but then she's going to skip more green. She's not going to eat fish. There's going to be a lot of good stuff that she misses, and she's trying to now live on whey protein, which is going to lack health, beneficial, vitality, improving nutrients that she could be taking in. So that's my reason.
So does that mean, Patricia, you'd be eating less vegetables?
Yes, I would be eating less and drinking more.
You know, here's what I would suggest, which would be kind of cool. And I tell people this all the time. You can do a self-experiment. Do it for like 8 weeks, get your blood drawn just for fun. Look at blood lipids, do a complete metabolic panel, do it for 8 weeks, then do a post-test and compare just to see. Put it this way, if nothing changes, then it's like, oh, I could do that. If it gets worse, then you're like, okay, maybe it's not the best thing to do. But here's the funny part. What if your blood work got better? That'd be kind of interesting. I mean, I would say you don't really know unless you do it. So you might as well try. I'll tell you a self-experiment I've done, just to give you an idea. I have my HDL levels. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it. My HDL levels have always been kind of low. They're like 35 to 40 since age 18 when I first saw it. Up until age 59, always low, always low. If I work out more, nothing changes. If I work out less, nothing changes. If I eat less, nothing changes. If I eat more, nothing changes. My HDL is chronically low. But the reason I know it's genetic is because I've tried all these experiments on myself. Now, however, I did find out this. If I eat a lot of rice, my triglycerides go up. If I decrease rice intake, because it's my main carb, triglycerides go down. So here's the trade-off, Robbie. I'm like, I like rice. I'm not going to eat less rice. So I'm willing to live with the trade-off of slightly high triglycerides because I know I don't have the other risk factors. So when you're weighing all the risk factors for whatever diseases, you know, particularly heart disease, since it's the #1 killer, it's like blood pressure is normal, body weight's normal, blood glucose is normal. I'm not diabetic. I work out all the time. I'm not stressed. Does it really matter if my triglycerides are a little high? The answer I give myself is no, because everything's a trade-off. And I'm happy if I eat a lot of rice. So then.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, exactly.
Let
me just comment because we have a couple posts in the chat like, oh, nutrition's so confusing. Some people say high, some people say low. So you have to read between the lines. You have to understand that, I have a tremendous background. Dr. Antonio on protein and nutrition has an even more tremendous background. And so we're sharing you, what is the benefit of high? What is the benefit of low? How do you read between the lines? And so you have to do exactly what Dr. Antonio just said, is quit analyzing the information and actually just do it, and do high protein for 8 weeks, do moderate protein for 8 weeks, see how you feel, see what the difference is, take the action. Because, the reality is everybody's like Dr. David Sinclair. He's a professor at Harvard. Is he smart? Does he know something? Absolutely. But he's looking at it like this about longevity. And that's the research about longevity. So you have to go, well, what do I want? Which is exactly what Dr. Antonio started with. I mean, it's science, it's a complex subject. So you have to figure out, what is the result that you want? What is it that you want from vitality, from your muscle mass, from your performance, fitness cap, and learn this stuff that we're bringing to you. It's like my good friend, Dr. Sachin Patel says, is, you know, the patient of the future is the doctor, which really means learn this stuff so you can apply it to yourself. You take control of your health. We're giving you the information and telling you why it's beneficial or why it affects things differently. And that's really, I just want to make sure that's the value that's being taken from this. Go ahead, Patricia.
Is muscle milk good?
I have some in the fridge.
Okay. Yay, me. Thank you.
I think Patricia likes this stuff, so.
Yes, I do.
Okay, Lucy, our next VIP. Hello, Lucy, and welcome.
Oh, unmute.
Yes.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I've had jaw problems for quite a long time with jaw surgery. So for quite a while, I had to have the protein drinks and stuff with the vitamins and everything in them. One, they don't taste that great, and they have a lot of sugar. So I did find a company in the States, actually, BioTrust, that actually has less sugar per the 2 scoops, and I only use 1 scoop, so it's half a gram of sugar for a whole cup. And I get my vitamin A and all my other vitamins. I do eat a lot of vegetables, usually the softer vegetables, like the greens like spinach and softer vegetables, just because of my jaw. Just for chewing at certain times a year, chicken is kind of out. I just because of my disease, I don't make as much saliva. So drinking is actually a better solution for me. Just because I have fish, you have to add a lot of sauce to it. The sauce is bad for you. And I actually know a cousin who had cancer and he couldn't eat at all. And he took Boost and it gave him diabetes because he wasn't paying attention to the amount of sugar. And that's what I just want to say is people need to pay attention to when they add like a protein source, how much sugar it has it. Because I'm very sensitive to all the chemicals that are in protein powder. So I went into Loblaws in Canada and I went in protein powder. Then I got it and I started feeling crappy because I looked at the chemicals. There was no the taste was a chemical. It wasn't a real chemical. So BioTrust actually has real vanilla bean and has real strawberry banana powder that's dried. So that's what I like. It's one of those options that people need to look at that because once you get, I got severe sensitivity over the years. I got sensitive to everything. Like it's just like I can't take a supplement from the store because it got that sensitive to the additives of the chemical additives. So you had to that supplement. So I had to buy supplements that didn't have the additives from the States, unfortunately.
Lucy, can I pause you just for one second? So we can help you the most. How can we help you? Like, what is your specific question so we can help you?
Would I be able to get enough protein with what I'm doing right now? I'm just wondering.
Yeah, Biotest. I actually used to work, this was a long time ago with Biotest. They have really good products. Their protein powder, protein drinks are actually quite good tasting, to be honest. But that's actually your best way, Lucy, to get the protein is through, I mean, it's just the most efficient way to consume it. As you mentioned, fish, you know, it's hard to eat fish if you have to mix it with sauce. But yeah, liquid protein is your best bet. And, consuming a couple of those per day will at least get you probably at least halfway to your goal. So I commend what you're doing. I think it's probably your best bet, Lucy.
Awesome. Did we answer all your questions, Lucy? Yes. Oh, sorry, you're mute. You're muted. I just want to make sure we answered all your questions. Yes. Awesome. Dina. Hello, Dina. Welcome.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Dina.
This is so good. Thank you. Let me, I'm actually listening to myself. Hold on a second. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, your audio is
Yes.
perfect.
I'm sorry. One sec. I'm sorry. I'm making it hard for everybody. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, we hear you perfect. Yeah.
I'm on two different things, so I'm gonna turn this off. Sorry. You want to take somebody else's call?
Sure, sure. Yeah. Okay. We'll come right back to you, Dina. Maggie. Hi, Maggie. Welcome.
So my question for you, Dr. Antonio, is I'm older. I'm in my late 70s. I'm an athlete. I weigh 160. When I try to eat that much protein, okay, this kind of gross. I get constipated. And any suggestions for getting around that? And the other thing I wanted to mention, anybody with milk, sensitivity, I drink A2 milk, which you get from Guernsey cows, and it works like a charm.
Yeah, a lot of people love the A2 milk. Is the constipation from is most of your protein from whole food, beef, chicken, fish,
Yes,
milk?
I don't do protein drinks, and my body fat content, I'm down around 25%.
And your carb intake doesn't drop when your protein intake goes up. Your carbohydrate
No, I eat a
fine,
lot.
fiber intake is fine.
Yeah.
Okay, so but when your protein intake drops, your GI tract works better. You're less constipated.
Yes.
In fact, this is one of those things I always say everything's a trade-off. Well, what my advice to you would actually be just drop your protein intake. What would be the lowest I would? Yeah. The lowest I would go would be 1.2 to 1.3 grams per kilo. So however many kilos you weigh, get at least 1.2 to 1.3, because obviously if elevating does that to your GI tract, then the only solution really is to drop it, unfortunately. But again, everything's a trade-off. Everything's a trade-off.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm pretty active, so I don't know the answer. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Well, I'm a big believer. If you're active, that quote cures most everything. I mean, people who exercise, they're just better off in general. So to me, if I were to rank diet and exercise, I know nutritionists will get mad at me, but I rank exercise way above diet. I mean, if you're not active, all this other stuff doesn't matter. So the fact that you're active is probably the single best thing.
Right. And I always try and find activities that are fun. I don't
that's awesome.
do this very often, but I'll go dancing,
Hey.
Yeah.
As long as you love the movement, that's good.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Maggie.
Thank you, Maggie. Those are awesome questions. Thank you. Dina, all right, you got audio. You're good to go.
I'm back. I'm sorry about that. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Yep.
Hi, Dina.
Amazing. This is such a great talk. So I have a couple questions. So I've understood with your amount of protein, and it sounds as though you're recommending that for both women and men, regardless, so that both men and women benefit. I've heard that it's important to consider the timing of protein to gain muscle protein synthesis after a workout, so that your recovery is best. And for women, that's a shorter time, so that women should have that 30 grams of protein within 30 minutes to 45 minutes after a workout, and men have a wider window of about 2 hours. Do you know, in your research, have you found that to be true?
The quick answer to that is no, it's not true. And in fact, there's two things you need to weigh: total intake per day, which is number one, and then timing. Now, most of us will spread our meals over 3 or 4 meals. So breakfast, lunch, dinner, and then maybe a snack. What I'd recommend post-workout is consume protein. I consume it actually immediately after, because it's just convenient and it's easy. But people say, does it matter if it's immediate or 15 minutes later, 30 minutes later? The answer to that, actually, it doesn't matter. However, why wait? and then, you know, consume it after your workout, and then maybe 2 hours later have your normal meal. So the advantage of a post-workout, what I call feeding window, is it represents another opportunity to eat. That's all it is. Now, there's people who skip it completely, which I think is weird. It's like it's an opportunity to eat so that you can recover. But there's no sex difference. Yeah, all the data has shown that you don't really have to do it immediately, but as a matter of convenience, I think you should, Dina.
When you're an older woman, you did mention that, you know, as we get older, that we don't synthesize it as quickly or as well, not quickly, but as well. So would that?
Yeah, we're less sensitive to it. I mean, I'm
Right.
older just like everyone else, and we actually, our intake has to be a little higher to make up for the fact that our muscles are less sensitive to the effects of consuming protein. So we actually have to consume a little bit more, you know, for issues related to preventing sarcopenia, loss of lean mass, and you know, and things like that.
So I'm a big believer that we're not over fat, we're under muscled, right? So I'm right with you, is that we can, you know, as we get older, we really do need to prevent.
I think we're both.
Yeah. Well,
I think we're
right.
over fat and under muscled.
Probably, yeah, probably right.
Yeah.
About that too. I know you're right about that too. Can I ask another question though? While I got you, what do you think about using BCAAs and the leucine, you know, the leucine content to supplement your protein intake?
I don't think, okay, in general, it's unnecessary. There might be one group of people where it might help. These are endurance athletes who are training a lot. And the group I always refer to are cyclists. Why? Because they're on a bike, maybe 2 hours, 3 hours, maybe 4 hours at a time. And adding the branched chain amino acids may actually help them recover. But most of us don't exercise that. I mean, I exercise a lot, but not that much. But if you exercise that much, then it might be helpful. But otherwise, you're better off just consuming the normal amount of protein you consume daily.
So you would just drink it, like if you were a cyclist, you would recommend drinking it as like putting it in a water bottle and while you're exercising during that time?
Yeah, and it's something to drink, while you're training. Yep.
And then one last question. When you talked about your labs that you take, were you taking inflammatory labs like HSCRP and things like that to look at the impact of the higher protein and to see were there any changes in the inflammatory markers?
Good question. No, there actually weren't any. We looked at, I remember we looked at C-reactive protein and nothing. There was no changes. But again, remember, these are people who exercise a lot. So they have that advantage already, that they're in such great shape, that it's kind of a unique population.
So you did test the markers. There just wasn't any elevation of the markers. Okay.
Yeah. Basically, there was no change in any blood parameter, like none.
Well, it's interesting.
Really cool.
Some athletes, even though as great shape as they're in, have pretty high inflammatory markers, and for some. But again, it might be their level of fitness and all these other things, genetic markers, of course. But this has been great. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks.
That's one reason why we look at youth fitness, even for our clients over the age of 50. How much physical activity did you, like Frank Booth's, right? Frank Booth did a lot of research on that in terms of, you know, how things affect you over the lifespan. So how fit you were as a kid has a lot about your genetics and how your, you know, internal fitness environment is programmed, how active you were. If you're really active in your youth up to the age about 20, 22, that programs your organism for adult adaptation to exercise. So that's why that's one of the things we look at and we report back to you as a VIP. And next up, our VIP next is Janie. And just so if anybody's, any of our VIPs, I just specifically in whatever order it puts on my screen, which will be in chronological order of when you raise your hand, that's how I call on our VIPs. So Janie, you are next.
Okay, great. So I have a few kind of weird allergies. They're mostly set up, it's mostly a reactive hypoglycemia response to any sugars or carbohydrates. I pass out, actually. So, and I can pass out within a 12-hour time frame after eating something that has sugar in it. So I've stopped eating sugar. So I also was trying this vegetable diet just recently, and I cut out eggs and various other things. I can't take in milk because of the sugar but because of what people have been saying, I think there's some milks that I might be able to drink. Goat milk seems to work pretty good, but I'm interested in the protein. I'm going back to eggs and I'm going back to a little bit of goat milk and feta cheese, things like that, because I think my body really needs protein. But I found this protein called Vega. I'll show you. And there's one called Vega Sport. It's pea protein. So it's from peas. Now I'm just wondering if that is a good enough protein to kind of fill in some of the areas where I'm not getting enough protein. And if
Yeah, actually, there's research on pea protein. In fact, there was a pea protein versus whey protein study showing that it worked just as well. We're talking a 40 gram serving. It was a 40 gram serving post workout. So yeah, if you're getting 40 grams of pea protein after you exercise, that's a great thing. That's absolutely a great thing. Yeah, I've tried pea protein. Personally, I'm not a fan of the taste, but if the goal is just to get protein, then it's a good thing. Yeah.
Well, this one has a little bit of other stuff in it. Not too much sugar. They use stevia instead, or stevia. So it doesn't taste too bad.
Yeah, it's a sweetener. I mean, some people love it. Some people like, but yeah, pea protein. I mean, there's actually pretty good data on it. It's not a bad choice, actually.
Okay, that's good. And then one lady said that she gets kind of constipated from eating or having too many of these drinks or too much protein. And I just liquefy my vegetables and I drink that. And it's actually really good. Okay. So you put a lot of green stuff in, some lemon, and just, you know,
I like the crunch of the vegetables.
Oh yeah, well this is in case, you know, if you need to really increase the amount of vegetables that you take and the fiber that you're taking in order to make things a little more free flowing, and that's a really good way to do it, actually.
Patricia does this. She's a picky eater, so she does that too.
Drinks her vegetables.
Yeah, we got to get her vegetables, so she just chugs it. Yeah. I mean, it's better. It is better if you eat it, but yeah.
I have more vegetables than most of people because my mom makes the nastiest smoothies that you can possibly imagine. She mixes in everything that does not go with each other at all. So I am full of nutrients.
Oh, good. Good. So is there a way that we can figure out how many eggs, like how much protein is in an egg and how much, if we're doing that, you know, 30 or 50 grams per, or 1 gram per pound technique for a daily intake of protein, how do we figure out? It's easy on these jars because it says exactly how much protein you get, but for like eggs or cheese or nuts or beans or any of those things, how do we figure out if we're getting enough protein in a day?
Actually, probably the easiest way is I have, there are mobile apps you can download on your phone that give you a calorie and macronutrient breakdown of all of these foods. Like with eggs, it depends if it's a small egg, a large egg, things like that. I use MyFitnessPal. Oh, I just noticed someone else is I use MyFitnessPal. Actually, I use that for research as well. It just gives you a general breakdown, and that way you can just look it up on your phone and you're good to go.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're very welcome, Janie. You're very welcome. So we have time, if it's okay for you, Jose, like we have 5 minutes. So we have, we'll take Nancy and Joyce. So both VIPs. So we'll take Nancy and Joyce, and then we will conclude today's session. Nancy. Hello, Nancy. Welcome.
Hello. So I'm a vegetarian. My body does not like much dairy. I do eat eggs. I do eat a little bit of yogurt. And I'm curious what you think about the need to get complete protein, and if that is within one meal or a day, and how something like the amino acid supplement Perfect Amino by Advanced Bionutritionals, which somebody else asked about in the chat fits into that. And then my second question is, do you have recommendations of types or brands of those ready to drink proteins that are vegan or vegetarian?
Oh, vegan or vegetarian? Oh, I was about to answer that. Then you said vegan or vegetarian, and I don't know of any ready to drinks that are vegan or vegetarian. The ones I usually recommend are milk-based proteins. So sorry, I can't help you with that. Now, in terms of, I think your first question had to do with getting all your protein at once. You'll have to refresh my memory.
Is there a need to have complete proteins? And if so, is that within one meal or all or over the course of a day? And then that amino acid supplement.
Right. You really want to get it at each meal. So if you have to mix and match foods to get all the essential amino acids, it's always best to do that. But clearly, what matters most is how much you get throughout the day. That would be the paramount concern. And here's the thing, you can actually take amino acid supplements that contain leucine. Leucine's probably one of the amino acids that tends to be low in a lot of these, low in vegans or vegetarians, because leucine tends to be quite high in animal-based products. So I think, when you look at data on, for instance, essential amino acids versus whole proteins, essential amino acids actually work better in terms of promoting muscle protein synthesis. So the trade-off is these amino acids don't tend to taste very good. I don't know how many you've tried, Nancy, but they're all the ones I've tried they're just not good. They're just not good.
Great, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Love it. Thank you so much, Dr. Antonio, for this. The way you share the answers is just, for me, it's so obvious. It's just the body of science and research that you have behind you. It's just the right thing for each person, and exactly like essential amino acids. I know you'd be like, eat your protein, but essential amino acids, yeah, they actually do. They do convert to protein. That it's the essential amino acids. So it's brilliant.
And they work well.
And then one last question, Joyce. Joyce is our last question asker here of the day. So welcome, Joyce. Oh, you're muted. Yeah.
There, now you can hear me. This has been great for me because after working out, I'd be tired. And I thought maybe it's because I'm getting too old to do what I'm doing. And I'm going to try the protein thing because I am 80, but I still work out a lot. And I was having trouble with digestion, and I started eating sauerkraut. And it's just amazing how the bloating went away and the digestion is much better. So I have to be careful.
Fermented foods, Joyce. Yeah, you know what I love? Not sauerkraut. I love kimchi. I don't know if you've eaten kimchi.
Yes, I have.
Fermented cabbage.
Yeah, I love cabbage. I could eat a head of cabbage. But anyway, just raw. But okay, thank you very much. Oh, thanks. One other question. I'm doing intermittent fasting, and I was told that elderly shouldn't do it. And I don't know why that would make a difference, but I jumped right in and it seems to be working. So
it shouldn't make it. Yeah, Joyce, it shouldn't make a difference with age, whether you intermittently fast at age 20, 30, or 70. It's just a technique to limit your food intake. And I think people who do IF or intermittent fasting tend to be just a little bit more disciplined in how they eat because they know they only have this window of time in which they could eat. So I think, well, there's no reason you can't because of your age.
And that's what helped me because I'd eat all the time. And so,
that's a good thing.
Cut me down to 16 hours I can't eat, and I can follow that. So, okay, thank you very much. It's been wonderful.
Joyce. Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce. Thank you.
You look up absolutely amazing for 80. I could not even, I was like, what? She's 80 years old? Goodness gracious. Good
Yeah, she
job,
looks great.
Joyce. Yes.
you.
That's good job.
I want your
Well-
fountain of youth.
We'll ha-
Exercise. We
Yes,
have to exercise.
I do that. Yay. Yay me.
So awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Antonio. This has been an amazing Full Body Fix show. I'm sure that you all loved it. You all walk away from this session with us with a wealth of information, ways to think about protein. And many of you here on the call with us are functional medicine practitioners or in the health arena. So one thing that I'd like to let you know about is Dr. Antonio's event that he has. Patricia, if you could please bring Dr. Antonio back up on the screen. So Dr. Antonio's event, I'll let him share a little bit more with you about it, but it is amazing. It's one of the world's best nutrition events. Dr. Antonio, share a little bit more with us about that.
Yeah, I organize a national conference. It's called the International Society of Sports Nutrition. The website is easy to remember, issn.net. I put it in the chat box. And if you want to come to Fort Lauderdale Beach, Florida, the hotel is literally on the beach. That's where the conference is. It is June 16 to 18, June 16 to 18. It's a fun event. You'll learn a lot of nutrition. You actually learn a lot about exercise as well. I'll be there. If you show up, say hi. Robbie, maybe I'll see you there. Patricia,
yes,
you'll be there
yep.
with your 3 protein shakes. In your
Yeah,
hand.
yeah, exactly. Great, thank you,
But
thank you.
I want to thank you, Robbie, for this opportunity to talk to your audience. It was fun. We could do it again.
Awesome, yeah, definitely let's do it again. Today was just protein, but I know there's so much more we could talk about. So
Absolutely, absolutely.
much love to you, brother. Make it an amazing weekend, and much love to all of you VIPs and our amazing audience members. For our VIPs, we'll see you at training on Monday. It's going to be amazing. Exercise, fitness, that's the one thing that kept coming up again and again. That's the one thing that for sure will improve your vitality and your longevity. So I'll see you there on Monday for our VIPs. Much
And
love to
for
all
our
of you.
non-VIPs, we see each other on next Saturday. Every Saturday, we have the show at 11 a.m. MST. I will drop the link again. Bye.